begin talking now. You can go ahead on. We're going to start talking about some cancers that can creep into a local church. And I'm going to say especially into a Bible-believing church. The reason I am referring to these as cancers is because once they get in, they begin to spread beneath the surface without people knowing it. And hopefully as I explain it, you'll see what I mean by that. But it attacks a foundational, it attacks the approach, the overall approach of a church. So it's not just one little doctrine that's associated with these particular things, but it's a foundational issue. So when we talk about charismaticism, the foundation of that movement, I think if I could sum it up, is feelings and experiences. That's the foundation of it. Biblical truth is determined by feelings and experiences. Visions, dreams, I prayed about it, this is how I feel the answer should be. There's a lot of sensationalism. If something drastic and big didn't happen, then they don't accept it as true. Which is why they have the music the way they do, constantly working people's feelings. That's why that music is such a massive part of their movement and their church services. Once we say that truth is determined by feelings, that feelings determine facts instead of the other way around. Facts lead to faith that leads to feelings. Once you reverse that, you're in for a mess. If you go feelings, faith, facts, well then where do you go with that? How do you teach people anything then? It doesn't matter what verse you show them, they have to have a feeling. So now you are an entertainer and not an edifier. By definition, you do not have to make sense, you have to make feelings. You have to connect. You have to work the crowd. And that, again, please understand, I know that there are people involved in such a movement that have good intentions and perhaps there are some true things that are said in these church services. I don't deny that. But on a foundational level, that's going to affect a person's growth as soon as they have to feel it in order for it to be true. If I can just briefly mention the music issue because this comes up frequently. I would say it hurts my feelings, but just talked about feelings, didn't I? Honestly, it used to hurt my feelings. It really doesn't anymore. It doesn't bother me. I know where I stand on this issue. And I'll talk to the Lord Jesus at the judgment seat of Christ about it. And you won't be there. What I mean by that is between him and I. I answer to him for the music we have in our church. Right? We do take requests on Sunday night from the hymn book. But I don't want to, by the grace of God, fall into this trap of giving the seeker, being a seeker-friendly church, making it a comfortable environment for worldly people to step into so that they go right from the bar to the church and it sounds the same. I despise that. I don't want that. This is just me, okay? Praise and worship, it irritates me when I hear people equate that with music. Praise, I know that you can praise God with music. I know you can worship Him in music. I get that. I know why music in church has ended up called praise and worship. But when churches start saying things like, now it's time to praise and worship, I can praise and worship during a sermon. I can praise and worship in a silent moment of prayer. I can praise and worship while I'm giving. So it's disappointing when it's just linked to music. I think choosing a church based on its music is an incredibly shallow way to choose a church. And I say this to you because I know many of you are very actively trying to reach out to classmates and workmates and invite them to church. And when they find out we don't have a live band and, smoke machines and strobe lights and the disco ball and and a DJ, when we don't have that, then they go, I'd rather go to another church. Okay, listen, if that's where they're at, they're not going to be convinced by a biblical sermon. If they're making decisions based on which music they vibe with more. This is slightly offensive when somebody says, your church and this church, you guys preach exactly the same thing, but I'm going to go here because I like their music better. Okay, time out. You actually think the doctrinal content of our pulpit and that pulpit is the same? Now, don't say that. I don't mind if you say, listen, you preach different things. I'm convinced of this doctrine, so I'm going to go to their church. Okay, I can respect that. But this nonsense of, no, you're all saying the same thing from the pulpit. Their music's better, so I'm going there. Give me a break. You're not listening. You're not listening. No, you're not. You're not listening. You're just waiting for the next song to happen. Yeah. Music, guys, this is obvious. You know that music is used to manipulate feelings. And this is a proven fact, like in financial industries. They have mood music. When you walk into a shop, there's certain music that they played. I worked in restaurants for a while. We were told by corporate to put certain songs, certain kinds of songs on the PA system. It makes customers eat more, and it makes them eat certain things. Sure. It actually gets them in a healthy mood or in a sugary mood. So whatever you want to push at a particular time of the year, you can put a certain kind of music on. So music, this is why at the end of sermons you'll hear they get the guy up on the piano. In some churches, the whole sermon. The pastor's up there, he makes a point, dun 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 dun. Man, I'm sorry. Can you imagine the Apostle Paul? The Apostle Paul up there making a point, and some guy over there, with a sack butt or a psaltery or a harp, boom, 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 boom. I mean, that's Hollywood. In Hollywood, they turn a certain kind of music on, the soundtrack or the background music, and it helps you anticipate what's coming next. So even though that guy is saying this, he's lying, because there's this creepy music in the background. You know when a sugary, sweet, great, romantic moment's about to happen because of the song that comes on. I'm just against using music in that kind of way. Music is a fantastic thing. It should be used properly in church, but certainly not to create a feeling or an experience. I think that's just a manufacturing of an experience. All right, Calvinism. This is not my opportunity to teach you the doctrines of Calvinism or to try to refute it. It's very clear you know where I stand on that as a doctrinal system. My point tonight is to talk briefly about why I think it acts as a cancer in a church and how I think it negatively impacts a local church. Right? Again, there's the setting for this. A Bible-believing local church, Calvinism gets introduced into it and how that can affect it. So at the core of Calvinism, and my biggest issue with it, is the nature and character of God is disparaged. That's my biggest problem with. I have several problems with Calvinistic teaching, the tulip, determinism, whatever you want to call it. But the nature and character of God is called into question here. Sorry. So to say something, and this is something that is often said by them, and again, I don't want to limit this to just one Calvinist or one Reformed preacher, because there's a spectrum of Calvinism. You can have a very extreme hyper type Calvinist person, and then a very soft Calvinistic approach. But here's the general idea: the sovereignty of God and the responsibility of man. And in the Calvinist system, they say these two things are happening at the same time, even though they are directly opposed to each other. They're both there at the same time. Now, there's a contradiction that they are forcing people to believe. And here's how this works. There's a couple ways I've heard them explain it. We feel like we have free will. So we feel like we're responsible. But that's just our perception. Actually, God's just pulling the strings. And He has made it to feel as if we have free will. But in the end, we're going to find out God actually ordained the whole thing. He planned it all out. And it was Him making the choices, and His choice was to make us feel like we're choosing. Okay, if that's what God did, if you believe God set it up like that, the whole thing's a sham. Unplug me from the matrix. Right? What's the point? In my Christian experience, I'm going to hit a wall where the only way I can press through that problem that I'm in is to trust the character of God. And if God is a trickster, I'm going to get very bitter. And that has affected many churches in an awful way. Now, another thing is this. If Let me use a simple illustration. God comes to man on a Monday and says, sir, I'm making all the choices here. All of them. I'm responsible for everything. I'm sovereign. I can do what I want. So whatever choices I make, all the choices that are ever going to be made are mine. Always. That's always how it will always be. That's on a Monday. And then on Tuesday, God shows up and says, okay, you're responsible for your own choices. You're going to make some choices. You're responsible. Always. That's how it's always going to be. Now, wait a minute. You just said that you're making all the choices, always, and that would never change. And now you're saying, I'm going to make choices, and I'm going to be responsible. That is what the Calvinist puts out there. The Calvinist will acknowledge God is sovereign, so he's responsible, but man is also making choices. Man's responsible. You are saying that A and not A are both true at the same time. That just can't work. Now, lest you think that I'm misrepresenting, this is a transcript from something John MacArthur said. Somebody asked him, how do you harmonize these two things? The sovereignty of God, the responsibility of man. His answer was this: how do you harmonize that? I don't know. In every major, and now forgive me, I am skipping ahead in a couple spots, but I'm just leaving out some of the fluff that he said, but the meat of the issue is here. He said, in every major doctrine of the Bible, you have an apparent contradiction that cannot be resolved. Really? He says, I know I can't be saved unless I'm chosen and called. And I know I can't be saved unless I'm willing to repent and believe. That you're saying two completely opposite things. He is saying that the Calvinist is right, and then he's saying the Arminian's right. And he's saying, I know both are true. He goes on to say, and this next sentence, I don't have to harmonize it, but nor can I deny those things. So it doesn't matter if it makes sense, it's right. That's not the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible does not contradict himself. He cannot deny himself. There are times when God is going to ask something of people that in the moment that makes them scratch their head and go, why would you have me do that? But the reason they move forward with it and do it is because they know God makes sense. They trust the character of God. Once you undermine the character of God and say that God arbitrarily shows up to people and says, you're going to hell. And then the question would be, but why? I said so. Now, if any of you were to kidnap another person, restrain them, put them in a cage for the rest of their life, is that morally okay? We need some crowd participation on this, please. Is that okay? Under no circumstance can I, against your will, just kidnap you, detain you. I can't do that. Nobody's going to look at that and go, yeah, that's okay. But yet the Calvinists will say God just chose unconditionally because he wanted to and said, you're going to hell. So forget about putting him in a cage. You're in an eternal lake of fire because I said so. That is morally not okay. But yet the Calvinists will then say, it's okay because God did it. Well, no, God doesn't do wrong things. God doesn't do nonsensical things. God is not the author of confusion. When God tells Abraham to sacrifice his son, when he tells him to take a walk in the desert and he'll, tell him when to stop, when God tells Isaiah, walk around naked and barefoot for with his buttocks hanging out for 3 years, the reason these men go through with these extreme things is because they know God must have a reason. Didn't God himself say in Isaiah 1, come now, let us reason together? And to ask people to believe that God will just arbitrarily, unconditionally, you're going to hell. There's nothing you can do about it. That's not reasonable. No human would look at another human and go, yep, that's okay. Now think about this. I'm talking about the nature and character of God. Romans 2, verse number 15. God put the work of the law in our hearts, right? To do what? To accuse or excuse one another. God put that in here. So when all of society listens to that illustration I just gave about kidnapping, put them in a cage, universally people go, no, 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 no. Well, you can't move that up to God then go, oh, God did it. You know why you would accept it if God did it? Because you would say, well, there must be a reason. Once you say it's unconditional, you've just said there's no reason. And that's where it's going to be very difficult to help somebody grow in their faith. There's going to be a massive level of uncertainty when things don't make sense. Well, I just got to, okay, well, hey, sarah, sarah, what will be, will be. Well, then okay, if that's the case, and this is the other cancerous part to this, is that there's a deadening of the nerves. Well, if it's not up to me, if it's up to him, and it doesn't matter anyway, why pray, why evangelize? Now, you do find many Calvinists that still evangelize and still pray. Much like MacArthur, he's a great example. He was very evangelistic. He prayed because he recognized there is truth to this Arminian approach. There is still responsibility of man. He just got theologically stuck at, I don't know how to harmonize these two things. So God would still be able to use a charismatic or use a Calvinist, not because of their peculiarities, not because of the false teachings that they might have, but because of the truth that they do have. If a man's preaching the gospel and he's preaching it right, even though he might have reached that conclusion of I need to preach the gospel because, and he has some weird reasons for doing it, and that's wrong, but he's doing the right thing, God can still use that. And God does still use that. I think if you take this to another level, that Calvinist is going to say, you know what, the reason I'm able to believe this system of theology is because God has gifted me with the faith to believe it. Well, now you have a different form of Gnosticism. And just stick around till next year when I explain Gnosticism in church history class, because in Gnosticism you have to have this illumination, this special enlightenment. Not everybody get it, but God has shown me the deeper things and I understand it. And you just haven't been gifted with that yet. Well, now you sit around going, I hope God one day gives me the ability to grow. I hope He one day shows me what I need to believe. He has shown you, and it is a choice. So I find that it attacks the very fundamental nature of God. Furthermore, something I've seen consistently is the approach of Calvinism nullifies assurance. It nullifies it because they will use John 15, verse 16 and apply it to salvation, which we've talked about that recently. You've not chosen me, I've chosen you, and ordained you that you should go and bring forth fruit, right? So once you apply that to salvation, now, how do you know if you're saved? How do you know? Fruit. So what if there's fruit today? You'd say, well, I must be chosen. It must be real because look at the fruit. God's doing it. Fruit. Okay, what if next year there's not as much fruit? And how much fruit should you have? How do you know? Right? How much fruit makes you saved? That's hard to know because it's not quantified in the Bible. So now, I asked a young man one day, how do you know you're saved? Yeah, I was baptized as a kid. I said, okay, that wasn't your choice though. Yes, but that made me part of the covenant. And I said, at what point did you receive Christ? Well, I guess I always have because look at the fruit of my life. I must be a believer. I said, okay, well just theoretically, what if later in life you stop living a good life and the fruit dries up and it's not there anymore? Then what would you say? He said, well, then I'd have to say that I wasn't elect to begin with. Well, now you're on this roller coaster of I'm saved today because there's fruit, and tomorrow I made a mistake, and there's bad fruit or no fruit, and now I must not be saved, up and down. So you don't know if you're saved until you get to the end. You don't know. Because until the end, you could still depart from the faith or lose the fruit, because the standard line is if you depart from the faith, it means you were never saved to begin with. Well, since that's always a possibility, you can never fully be sure of your calling and election. So there's zero chance for assurance. It is salvation by fruit and not by faith. And for those reasons, I would call it a cancer. All right, let's move now to the compromising section of this. Compromising. I spoke briefly about it on this side as well a little bit. But compromising, whenever convenience and comfort are the standard by which people make choices. What is the most convenient doctrine? What is the most comfortable way to have a church service? You see, that becomes your approach to truth. That's why they have their approach, sensationalism. They have their approach that even though it doesn't harmonize, oh well, just accept it anyway, and it's kind of an unreasonable thing. And then you have this one where convenience and comfort, they are the deciding factors for truth. Well, once you go down that path, you are forever going to be stuck in a mode of compromise. And if something is not popular in society, we just don't talk about it, we don't say it, or we change our teachings to match what is popular. And if you ever want to see a church that has done this the most, I mean 1,000 times more than any other denomination, the Catholic Church. They are, Brother Donovan has a lesson he calls the chameleon Catholic Church. Because they do, every age that they're in, they just kind of match the popular thought of the day. So at a certain stage, they would have excommunicated and killed a person for saying that God, that evolution was true. But now they teach evolution. They teach, I have it in my Catholic Bible. I read it to my dad the other night. I said, Dad, do you believe Eve ate fruit in the garden? He said, well, of course. I said, right here in the Catholic Bible in the notes, it says, only the literalist, the fundamentalist, they only believe that stuff. We know better than that. Of course she didn't eat fruit. I said, do you believe Jonah was swallowed by a whale? He said, yeah. I said, right here it says, that's just a fairy tale. There it is. So that's the popular thinking of the day. So they just keep shifting. So compromise is a very slippery slope. Look at 1 Corinthians 6. Let me just reiterate something or perhaps speak further to it. If there is an easier way to do something, right? If a church member comes with the suggestion of, hey, I know we're doing this, but this might work better. Please be open to that. I mean, keep learning. There might be a better way to sharpen the axe or something. But do not sacrifice what's right simply for what's convenient. Easier is not always better. So you need to consider, what are we trying to accomplish, and what would we give up in order to accomplish that? It may not be worth the cost involved. So, and then, how do you know? How do you know if it is a compromise? You need to ask the question, what is the will of God? What are we trying to achieve? Will this thing that we're thinking about doing help us or hinder us to achieve that ultimate goal? And that's where you're going to get your bearings straight for compromise. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 12, Paul says, all things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. So can I do it? Sure, maybe you could, but that doesn't mean it's the best thing to do. And look at chapter 10. It's very much the same, but slight difference in the wording here. Verse 23, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. It's not going to build me up. It's not going to help me towards Christ. It's not expedient. It's not fitting for the current, the project at hand. So those are things to consider with compromise. You will receive quite a bit of criticism for not, for standing your ground, because people come in and they're used to things in other churches, and why don't we just do it the same way other people do? Sometimes you do need to explain, this is why we do it the way we do. And other times, you can't fully explain it. Sometimes it's just things you know as the leader, you're privy to certain information, and you cannot express that to the entire congregation. You're just going to have to stand your ground. Don't be a jerk about it, but just know that you got to do what's best for the church and not what's most popular. All right, now in your packet, let's see here. Do we have, I think we do, the next thing. Yeah, we'll talk about missions just for a minute here. All right, missions. Some of you are already praying about going to the mission field. Turn to Nehemiah chapter 2. You're praying about going there. So let me give you a few thoughts about the mission field. I'm going to refer you back to the lesson where we talked about how to find the will of God. You guys remember the fourfold process there: Bible, prayer, and then counsel, circumstance. And those four things need to line up. Do it this way. Line up. All right. So that's where it starts. While you are finding the will of God, you can do this before or after, but taking a survey trip is very helpful. Okay? And I know guys that took the survey trip before they found the will of God. Brother Peter Putney in Colombia. He came to visit me in Malawi years ago, before he was ever a missionary. I met him when he was 18 years old. I met him in Idaho I was preaching a college and career conference in that big church there. And we hit it off pretty good, became friends. So then he came to visit in Malawi. His pastor gave him the advice, go visit a missionary that knows what he's doing and just learn. You don't have to go to that field, but just go learn and see what God will show you. And then God redirected him to literally the other side of the world. But a survey trip can be very helpful. This is where you go visit the place and do exactly what's in the title, survey. You just look around. You gather information. I always think of Nehemiah 2 as a survey trip. Verse 12, Nehemiah says, "And I arose in the night, I and some few men with me. Neither told I any man what my God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem. Neither was there any beast with me, save the beast that I rode upon. And I went out by night by the gate of the valley, even before the dragon well, and to the dung port, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and the gates thereof were consumed with fire. Then I went on to the gate of the fountain, and to the king's pool, but there was no place for the beast that was under me to pass. Then went I up in the night by the brook, and viewed the wall, and turned back, and entered by the gate of the valley, and so returned." You know what he's doing? Just walking around, riding around, just looking at how bad Jerusalem is right now, and how much help they need. In verse 16, "And the rulers knew not whither I went, or what I did. Neither had I as yet told it to the Jews, nor to the priests, nor to the nobles, nor to the rulers, nor to the rest that did the work. Then said I unto them, Ye see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lieth waste, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come, and let us build up the wall of Jerusalem, that we be no more a reproach." Once you've taken the survey trip, you can speak intelligently to the needs of that area. And then it's much easier when you're talking to other churches about, please help me with financial support or whatever kind of support. Here's what we're facing. And if you've been there, that really does make a difference. So a couple of tips for while you're on the survey trip, some things you need to do. Look for the needs in that area. Same advice I gave you for starting a local church. Go to that area, see if there is a need. There may already be a missionary on the ground in that city. I would always recommend look at the capital city first. The reason I suggest that is if you can set something up in the capital city, you're going to find more people there, and you can train them there and send them out to the more rural areas. So that it makes for a great hub. That's not the only way to do it, though. Potchefstroom is not the capital, right? You can go to a different city, but there are churches in Joburg and Pretoria, and so that's a whole nother story. But look for the needs in the area. Number 2, while you're there, look for housing. You got to live somewhere when you get there. And look for a safe place and a place where your family is going to feel, please understand the word, comfortable. What I mean by that is they shouldn't be afraid for their life every night. And I know some missionaries that put their families at risk like that. Just so that, hey, we're being natives. You're going to die. I was told, listen, I'm quoting the Malawians. When I got to Malawi, and they said, Bwana, where are you thinking to stay? And I said, well, I was given the advice to look in this area, and they said, yes, good. Go look in those areas. That's where the missionaries like to live. Don't live here with us. You'll die. Now, I appreciated that. The missionary before me, he almost did. He was there 11 months and had to go home because he had malaria 5 or 6 times. In 11 months, he couldn't stop getting sick. He lived in the back room of a Malawian's house out in the rural areas. He couldn't survive it. We're just not built for it. So you got to know your limits. Look for safe housing. Look at the cost of things. Go around town, ask people how much does the water cost and the electricity. What about taxes? Your city rates and taxes. What's the cost of printing? Make sure you ask that. A lot of missionaries don't factor that into their budget. They show up on the field, and now you need to print flyers to invite people to church, print tracts, print songbooks, print discipleship books. It's too expensive to have it shipped from whatever country. You're going to need to do it in country, and that can get expensive. Look at groceries. Because everything in Malawi was shipped up from South Africa, whoa! What would cost us maybe $1 in America for a box of like cornflakes would cost $14 in Malawi. So a tank of petrol in America would cost $50, but then in Malawi it would cost 4 times that. Well, you got to factor that in. You need to, and again, look at the price of vehicles and fuel. In Malawi, you have to pay 125% customs to bring a vehicle in. And every vehicle, they don't manufacture vehicles there. Are you kidding me? They sometimes have oxen and donkey to ride on. I guess that's a manufacturing thing. But they don't make cars there. So the cars come up from Japan. They come in from Japan, up from South Africa or something. 125%. So if it costs 10,000 rands here, it's going to cost, what, over 20,000? 22,000, something like that? That's a lot. And then look for how much the fuel is as well. Be sure you ask about the official paperwork that is required by the government for you to be there. Visa requirements, how long will the visa be for? Do I have to leave the country to do my visa paperwork? Ask those questions. When I showed up in Malawi, I hadn't asked those questions. I showed up to live there with my family and handed the guy my passport at immigration in the airport and said, he said, welcome to Malawi. What are you here for? I'm a missionary. I'm moving here. Where's your visa? Oh, no. I'd like for you to give me one. Who's sponsoring you? What? Sponsor. You need a sponsor. Oh, no. I'm an independent Baptist. What? He hadn't heard of that. He said, no. 30 days, off you go. I didn't know about any paperwork, so ask those questions. And then on that note, ask a lot of questions. While you're there, ask the people. If you're visiting with another missionary, ask him a lot of questions. Make sure you interview the missionary's wife as well. If you're not able to take your wife, if you're married, then make sure you hear from her. Have your wife write out a list of questions to ask that missionary wife so that you know what you're getting into. But ask a lot of questions. Once you move to the field, if God so leads you, then you need to start learning immediately language and culture. Those two things are going to work together. If you learn the language, it's going to make it so much easier to learn the culture as well. Options for language. Many countries do have a language school you can go to. You need to know your preferred way of learning. I have no problems with any of these. I never went to a language school. I did hire a private teacher. That's my next option for you. That really didn't help much. I was learning the language faster on my own than what this guy was teaching me. And he was just going through his syllabus. He was teaching American Peace Corps workers. Well, all they needed to know was like, where's the toilet and how do I buy food? They needed to know the basics. I needed to know a bit more. So what helped me is just asking people questions. Now that's how it worked for me. I asked my interpreter one day, teach me how to present the gospel in Chichewa, no help. No interpreter. So he gave me all the verbiage. Once I learned how to do that, now I just needed to plug in more and more vocabulary, and from there it turned into preaching sermons, and then it became fluent. So that's what worked for me. And I found it a great way to interact with people. I still do it here. I do it with some of you. So what does this Afrikaans word mean? I go, why would you say it like that? Man, that sounds funny. And it's a nice way to have a conversation, and it's a nice way for me to learn things. And then I will say it's very humiliating too. It'll keep you humble. It takes time. You got to have a lot of patience, and it keeps you humble. Afrikaans has done a fantastic job of humiliating me on many, many occasions. And it will continue to do so. That's okay. You guys are harsh. You guys are. I just need to tell you to your face, you're harsh, You're so harsh. Wow, you're harsh. Some of you are very encouraging and helpful, but I'm talking the Afrikaans mensa, the folk. Whoa. You guys allow for no room for any mistakes. I mean, as die accent verkeerd is. What do you want me to do, right? The Afrikaans accent is one of the most difficult to learn. I have actually studied that and looked into that. Like professional actors, they say this is one of the hardest to get. So that makes me feel better. I researched that just to make me feel better. Yeah, I did. But now, in Malawi, I learned the local language. As soon as I stepped out of the doors of my house, everything was in Chewa. Everything. Bible school, church, everything. As soon as I came into my house, English. Because I'm trying to make my family feel comfortable and safe, right? And maintain some of our own culture there. Now, here it's different because by using English, I can reach multiple people groups at once. If I learned one language, and I did pray about that, if I learn one language and just use that language in the church, I'm immediately cutting off several other options. So that's why English is what I've chosen here. But I admit, I need to do a better job, and I am trying to learn more and more Afrikaans. That is the predominant language here. And if any of you spend time around me outside of like these formal settings, I do try to put more Afrikaans into my conversations when appropriate. I try. So I think that's also helpful advice for you. Try your best to learn the language. All right, planting a church in a foreign country. Go back to the lesson where we talked about planting a church. Everything is the same. Evangelize, disciple, assemble. However long that takes. But the one thing I'll say that's different, be mindful of cultural differences. You are not there, if I can speak from my point of view, I did not come here to start an American church. I didn't go to Malawi to start American church. I'm not there to convert them to be American Christians. Right? So you need to find that line, that biblical line of here's the right way to do it. Right? There's a biblical way and then there's an American way. And not everything we do in America has a reason or a point. It's just what we do. And that's fine. That's what we do. It may not work here. So be mindful of that. In Malawi, there's no break. They never take a break between Sunday school and the main service. It's one long, continuous thing. You go about 3 or 4 hours in a row. My first church service, after Sunday school, I said, okay, let's take a break. And they all stood up and went, are we done? I said, no, we're just taking a break. Main service in 15 minutes. But why? But why are we waiting? So we can chat and just take a break. But why? Completely lost them. So that was the last time we ever took a break. And that's the way they did it. There's nothing wrong with not taking a break. Right? That's the way they do it. So I'm not going to disrupt something that needs no disruption. Nothing unbiblical about that. Singing choruses, that's what we do in Malawi. We've actually done it once or twice in our church, but it's not as prevalent in this part of town. In South Africa, you do find it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with them. But in Malawi, much more prevalent. In Malawi, the churches are segregated by gender. All the men sit on one side, all the women on the other. It took me 5 or 6 years to figure out who was married to whom. Serious, because the men are supposed to walk 10 steps ahead of their wives on the streets. I never saw them together. So I did have to ask people that were in Bible school, so which one's your wife? I didn't know. So you got to be mindful of that. All right, and then mission work as well. Independence, you're trying to achieve independence. The goal is to establish a church that will outlive you. If that church cannot survive and function without you, number one, you're not ready to move on and start another church yet. And number two, you're not doing everything you need to do in that church. Let's say if your goal is not that. They need to have spiritual independence. That is, be able to preach, learn the Bible, obey, walk with God, all of that without you there. And financial independence. And this is especially prevalent in poorer countries where the missionary is funding everything, and as soon as he goes away, that's it. The whole thing dries up. Pastor goes home. Nobody can do anything. So in Malawi, again, I don't pay those pastors. I don't pay their salaries. I stay completely out of that. They are paid from within, that biblical system of they feed the flock feeds them. So that's the way that should work. And then lastly, I'll talk briefly about underground work. When you're working underground, and all of us know that we have Brother Fricky, if I can use that name, in that undisclosed place, that is incredibly slow work. Do not expect great results fast. It's underground work for a reason. It's illegal to be a Christian there for a reason, or to be a missionary there for a reason. So be ready to invest much more time, and I would suggest this, into one or two people. Just take out of your mind the idea that I'm going to have 50, 80, 100 people coming to church. Take that out of your head. You're going to have 2 or 5 or 10 maybe. I got a guy I graduated with. He went to a country where it's illegal, and he met in his apartment for several years, in his flat, and they had to put mattresses on every wall and on every door, and then they had to sing like this, just very light. And when he preached, he would just talk like this. And they wouldn't meet at the same time every week because it would tip people off in that country what they're doing. So it's a slow work. What you get to do, though, is invest time into those 1 or 2 faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. And those natives can then, after you die or go home, one or the other, go back to your home country. Because when you die, you do go home. But anyway, when you move on, they can keep going with the truth that you've given them. So don't worry about, I need to have a big church that's growing constantly. Just focus in on those few faithful people that are willing to dare come and congregate with you. All right, let's talk. Guys, let me ask you. I know, forgive me. I'm trying my best with time here. I'm 3 minutes till the hour. We have one section left, and that is the pastor in his home. I don't plan to take too long on this. Are you happy to give me a few extra minutes and finish this? And that way we're done. And then, okay, we can spare that other Sunday for other things. Okay, so let's talk about the pastor and his home. First of all, solidify your calling. And we've already talked about this a lot, about the calling and the burden. But let me just, when we're talking you personally as the pastor, solidifying your calling is going to be very important because your family. You need to know that the sacrifice you are, what's the right way to say this? Not asking. You're not asking them. You're forcing. But not in a bad way. You understand? Let's go to this foreign country, but your wife is not called. Your kids are not called. You're called. Your wife is called to submit to you. So her calling is to submit to your calling. And then the kids, they're just obeying what dad has told them to do. So they're trusting you. That's a lot of trust in you. So Abraham, if you're going to tell Sarah that we're leaving everything behind to go to this other place, not quite sure how it's all going to work out, but that's what we're going to do, then Sarah needs to know that you have done your due diligence and you know you're called, and it's not just this in-the-moment kind of fleeting feeling that you have. So make sure that you have proven that. And then number 2, take heed to your own walk. So take a quick look here at Acts chapter 20. Again, I've already mentioned this briefly, so we don't need to belabor the point, but Acts chapter 20, and verse number 28. Paul is speaking to the Ephesian elders here, so these are the leaders of the church. Take heed, therefore, unto yourselves and to all the flock, over the which the Holy Ghost hath made you overseers. If I can just draw your attention to the beginning. Take heed, therefore, unto yourselves. Before you take heed to the flock, you take heed to yourself. The whole airplane thing works very nicely here. If you've been in an airplane, they'll always tell you before the plane takes off, in the event of some problem, the mask will come down. Put your own mask on first, then help the people around you. Because you're no good to anyone if you pass out due to lack of oxygen. Look at 1 Timothy chapter 4. First Timothy 4, verse number 16. Many times, preachers will get in, sometimes not even realizing it, but we are preaching about prayer and Bible reading, and we're spending so much time preaching about it, we're not doing it. Because I'm so busy putting a sermon together to get you to do it, and I think, well, of course I'm spending time in the Bible. I'm putting a sermon together. Yes, you are, but that's not the same as reading just to let God speak to you on some other level. Right? So make sure you make a difference between that devotional aspect of reading the Bible and then the ministerial aspect of preparing a sermon. 1 Timothy 4, verse 16, take heed unto thyself and unto the doctrine. Continue in them, for in doing this thou shalt both save thyself and them that hear thee. This is to the benefit of your family and your church if you stay as right with God as you can. Verse 13, same chapter, Paul says, till I come, give attendance to reading. Now that's not just the Bible, but any profitable book. To reading, to exhortation. That's sermons. Listen to good preaching. And to doctrine, he says. So good teaching. So give attendance to it. So one other thing on this. It's very easy for the preacher, because I do the preaching all the time, to fail to listen to preaching. Now, it's been such a blessing. I cannot tell you how great it's been, what an answer to prayer it's been to have Garrett as a pastor with us in this church now. I get to sit and listen to some good teaching and preaching. And I get fed when he's in the pulpit. That is, I know what a difference that makes because I went years without that. To get that consistently is amazing. But I still supplement my need for preaching. YouTube makes this easier. I listen to sermons consistently. I used to get cassette tapes, that's how old I am, and then CDs eventually. And I would keep a constant loop of that stuff going. You need to be preached at, guys. It's very important. All right, the next thing, make time for your family. Make time for them. As I mentioned a moment ago, they weren't called, and be mindful of that. They are there voluntarily, let's hope, and they are submitting to this and going along with it. Do not force them to be a part of everything. That's a mistake I think that some missionaries make. We're on the field, we're in it together, so Amy plays the piano. But Sugar, I've tried to make this clear. If it's not, I'm making it clear in front of everybody. Not awkward at all. If there's ever a time where something is going on in her life and she's not up to that, for whatever reason, she is welcome to come and say, Dad, can you get somebody else to fill that spot? And I tried to make that clear with Megan, because our oldest daughter, she was also the piano player for a while. Caleb, our son, he worked the AV table before there was an AV table. He has always been such an amazing help. And when he got to America, you know what he did? He started helping there. And he set up the AV booth in the church he's in now. You know what he's done now? Last like 2 or 3 weeks? He went to the pastor, he said, Pastor, I need a break. I've just been at this so long. Since I was a kid, I've been doing this. It's starting to pull me away from my walk with the Lord. I feel like I'm coming to church to work a second job. I want to come to church to be in church. So make sure your family keeps those priorities right, and don't force them to do things just because they are related to you. All right, number 4, spend time with friends. I really wish somebody else could stand up here and teach this part of it, because I'd like to sit down and listen to this part. This is great when guys like Brother Welder, Brother Hoots come, these older men, and they say some of these things. I feel a little bit bad saying, Mike, it's okay to go spend time with friends. Because as I mentioned earlier, my schedule is so busy, I could just spend time ministering to people that need it all the time. Sometimes you need that leisure. You need to just pull away and be with friends and not talk about the ministry. I mean, kom ons braai and let's talk about rugby. Serious. Like, learn me that sport. Maybe one day I'll win you. Some of you are like, well, what did he say wrong? I didn't hear anything wrong with that. I'll tell you later, but we all need downtime. You need to find some friends that are refreshing. Paul talked about the coming of Titus and how Titus was refreshing. You need that. Just some guy that he's not going to come in and make life more difficult and talk about awkward things. He's just going to be a blessing. It's easy to relax around him or her. If you're a young lady, you need that. It's also good to get out of your bubble. It's very easy for the pastor to get stuck in a ministry bubble, and all I hear all day is ministry things, Bible things. And I forget that there's a world out there that doesn't operate the same way we do at church. And I lose touch with reality in some ways. And I start to live in this fairy tale world where, listen, just quote a verse and the problem goes away. Yeah, but pastor, I'm surrounded by 50 people at work that nonstop cuss and make dirty jokes and constantly talking. Okay, it's sometimes helpful for me to realize what you're going through, and by spending time with people that are in that, it actually makes me a better minister. Even today, I had a prayer meeting with one of our members, and he and I have been friends for a long, long time. He joined the church almost at the beginning. And I realized, as I was talking Sunday morning about the leisure activities, I have done more leisure things with that guy than anybody else in my life. I had counted up the different activities I've done and all the sports and just the things we've done together. And I told him today at that prayer meeting, I said, brother, I don't know if you realize, this is what you've provided me. You have been a friend. You're not just a church member. You're a friend. You remember where Jesus said, you're not just servants, you're friends. And you need to identify those people and make time for that. All right, number 5, be smart with finances. Be faithful in that which is least. That's the command of Jesus, Luke chapter 16. Again, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, so quick comments here, but making tents, as Paul did. If you have a side job, not wrong. That's okay. Just make sure that it doesn't overtake your calling and hinder you from performing your duties as a minister. Brother Ashbad in Malawi, he was the first pastor I trained. For a short while, things got very tough. His church didn't have much money to pay him. He came to South Africa and worked for, I think, almost a year. And he was an electrician. We put him through electrical school so that he could work a side job and supplement his income. But just opportunities weren't there. He worked in Joburg, then he got work in Cape Town. People in Joburg called him back and said, we'll give you a contract. And Ashbad said, you know what? I'm called to be a pastor. So I'm going to give up, and he was making good money here. I'm going to give that up and go back. And I really, what a great example. The calling came first. He said, this is what God's told me to do, so God's going to provide. So I don't judge him for coming down here and trying to supplement the income. He didn't abandon the church. He had a man that he had trained that was preaching for him, but he realized, that's my flock. I'm their shepherd. I'm supposed to be there. So he took a financial knock. But now I must admit, looking back, he doesn't regret it, and he's doing all right now, and the church is supporting him. So, right decision. Look into things like investments, savings accounts. You need to think about your retirement. I didn't. When I got into the ministry, one of the first things I did when I was accepted as a missionary, I opted out of Social Security, which in America is like your pension program. Now I have nothing. When I'm done preaching, that's it. I have nothing. I didn't start thinking about that till I was in my mid-40s. And then I realized, you know what? My voice is going. Now my heart's going. I'm breaking down. I may not be able to preach until I'm 85. I may not ever see 85. I may not see 55 the way this is going. I need to have something in place. So count this as a commercial, but I've gone to FFG, and they have helped us tremendously, just setting up things for a financial future. So think about that. I know it's not a real spiritual thing, but it's a real thing, right? It's a real thing. And then obviously you need to trust God. You need to trust God. Be smart with finances, and then trust God to take care of you. Trust him more than the stock market. All right, 1 Timothy 4, verse number 8. Be mindful of your health. And again, I wish somebody else would stand to talk about this. Paul says here, for bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things. Get some exercise. Eat well. I know that's very basic. That's good advice for anybody, right? But sometimes as a preacher, I don't know what it is about guys in the ministry. How many of you know what a blimp is? You know what a blimp is? In America, we have a bainom for certain preachers. They become gospel blimps. Think of a hot air balloon, which is actually a better analogy because there's a lot of hot air coming out. But they just blow up. They get in the ministry and they pack on, 50, 60 kgs. You're like, dude, what are you doing all day? I mean, it's just reading your Bible and eating donuts. And it's bad. It's a bad testimony. Really, it's a bad testimony. But now, guys, I mean, health breaks down, okay? I am a good example to learn from because I have pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed for so long that my body has forced me to stop. I mean, my voice gave out because I just used it too much. When I found out I had to have surgery to remove a vocal polyp, you know what I did? The next Saturday I went out, stood on top of our church bus and preached in Hermosa in the open air. Because I didn't have an off switch. Now that's not smart. That's not smart. I'm telling you that story not to brag. I'm telling you so you learn from that. It's okay to say, I need rest. I need to eat better. I need some exercise. So be mindful of that. Look at Philippians 2 real quick. Almost done. Philippians 2. You should view your body, as the Bible tells you, as a temple of the Holy Spirit. Think of it like a vehicle, if you will, that is getting you from place to place so that you can serve God. This body is a tool. It is a temple. It is a place for God to dwell. And if you don't take care of the temple and it breaks down, it's like a broken down vehicle. You're not going anywhere, or not as far as you should. Philippians 2, verse 25. Paul says, "Yet I supposed it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother, and companion in labor, and a fellow soldier, but your messenger, and he that ministered to my wants. For he longed after you all, and was full of heaviness, because that ye had heard that he had been sick. For indeed he was sick, nigh unto death. But God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. I sent him therefore the more carefully." Paul knows he's sick, so he doesn't want to push him too much. "That when ye see him again, ye may rejoice, and that I may be the less sorrowful. Receive him therefore in the Lord with all gladness, and hold such in reputation, because for the work of Christ he was nigh unto death, not regarding his life, to supply your lack of service toward me." It's not an indictment. Paul's not rebuking them. The lack of service is they just weren't able to help. They weren't there. They didn't have the finances. Epaphroditus then stepped up and did a bit more than he actually could, and it pushed him far. So sometimes this is going to happen, but as much as you can, be mindful of your health. All right, come back to 1 Timothy now. Forgive me, I should have told you to hold that, but 1 Timothy 5 and verse 17. And the last point on the pastor and his home and the pastor's personal life, if you can say it like that. Take time off when necessary. Take a break. That's okay. 1 Timothy 5, verse 17, "Let the elders that rule well be counted worthy of double honor, especially they who labor in the word and doctrine." I just want you to focus in on that word labor. That word means to work until you're fatigued. So there's work, and then there's labor. Those are not the same thing. Work until you're fatigued. Once you've worked until you're worn out, now you've labored. Right? So laboring in the word and doctrine, much study is a weariness to the flesh. It will wear you out. And especially with the spiritual aspect of what you're doing, it will hit you harder than you think. So my advice, take breaks daily. In your day, don't be ashamed to step away from the desk. Go do something different. Just get your attention something. If you want to read a book, if you want, I have a dartboard in my office. I'll just throw darts for 5 minutes, just so I can stand up and get blood pumping through my legs again. And then I'll sit back down and go right back to work. Take breaks. Sometimes I'll go play 9 holes of golf. Now, if there's no one on the course ahead of me, all I have to do is walk fast, I don't run, I can finish in 1 hour. Because I don't have that much time. So I've learned how to do it. Now, you got to hit the ball straight, too. That's also very helpful. If that doesn't happen, it can be a different story. But take a break. And then there's daily breaks and there's extended breaks. Don't be ashamed to take a week vacation or 2 weeks of vacation. That everybody else would do that too. Just because you're a pastor doesn't mean you don't get to take a break. You need that as well. And then taking time off when necessary, this will require that sometimes you tell people no. And for me, that's probably the hardest part of taking a break, is that I know other people could be getting helped in this time, and now they are persisting in their problem while I go and relax on the beach. Oh, it is. It's a struggle for me to lay there and go, oh, praise the Lord. Oh, so-and-so's, yeah, they're in the hospital. Oh, God help them. Thank you for the beach. It's hard. It's hard. But listen, that's reality. That's reality. And you got to know the person on the other end of that, 99.9% of the time, they're not holding it against you. They understand that you're human. All right. Just a couple extra thoughts. Just let me read them to you. No more time for this. We finished everything in the syllabus there. Much of what you're going to learn about church will happen in church and not in a classroom. Just know that. Just participating in church is the greatest classroom for the local church. And then ask questions, all that you want. Gather ideas now before you start a church. If you're thinking about this one day, ask all the questions you want about how things work behind the scenes. Always feel free for that. And then lastly, never forget for whom you're doing this. As soon as you start thinking, I'm doing this for the people, that's a noble thing, but the wrong thing. I'm doing this for the people because of the Lord. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 5, Paul said, we preach not ourselves, but Christ Jesus the Lord, and ourselves your servants for Jesus' sake, for Christ's sake. Yes, I am serving you, I'm girding the towel, but that's ultimately because the Lord told me to do that. If the people become the main goal, they will let you down, they will disappoint you, they'll break your heart, you'll exit the ministry. So much rather be constrained by the love of Christ. The people, you'll get some great blessings and encouragement from them, but make sure that you remember you're doing it for Christ. All right, I just want to finish up by talking about these assignments here as well. Help me, Garrett, the due dates for these assignments. The problem text is due on the 12th, and I'm going to give you an exam now. That's due next it'll be by next Wednesday. Then there's a third assignment. That's due on the 5th. Okay, so just be mindful of that, everybody. Let me give you some notes quickly on your local church exam. It is not a long one, so I've been told, so hopefully this won't take too much of your time. Number 1, describe the local church and the universal church. You can get that right out of discipleship if you'd like. Number 2, give 4 things that work in harmony when pursuing the will of God. That's that fourfold thing we've been talking about. Number 3, name 2 offices in a local church mentioned in Scripture. Now, the 2 offices, look in Philippians 1, verse 1. You'll see them. Don't confuse this with Ephesians 4, verse 11. Those are offices that are involved in the body of Christ, the universal church. I'm talking local church. Number 4, before being enabled and put into the ministry, what must you be? 1 Timothy 1, verse 12. You'll see the answer. Number 5, list the 4 steps for starting a local church using the order presented in class, minus the part about church membership. That's something that comes later. Number 6, name 3 challenges a local church can face. Pick any 3. Number 8, briefly explain the word blameless in relation to, forgive me, I skipped number 7, I'm sorry. How are unfaithful members detrimental to a local church? Now, number 8, briefly explain the word blameless in relation to what is expected for a bishop and deacon. Remember, those are categorical statements. Just explain that briefly. Number 9, what can a woman not do as it pertains to functioning within a local church? The one thing she can't do. Number 10, biblically define the word labor. Just mentioned that. And lastly, briefly describe a calling and a burden. You'll have 2 memory verses, Acts 20:28 and Hebrews 13, verse 17. All right, any questions about anything? Thank you again for some extra time. I appreciate that. I know we've taken you a little long. You have something? Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. 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 Mm. Sure. Sure. Yeah, so the fact that God allows bad things to happen. Right? So it's one thing to say God ordained it. God made the bad thing happen. That's one issue. But then we still have to struggle as non-Calvinists. God does allow bad things to happen. Now, that's part of God actually being fair. he has to allow people to make choices, even bad choices, and experience the consequences for those sins. But why would God then allow somebody to be born, make the bad choice, end up in hell? Why not just prevent that birth to begin with? That's generally how that's phrased. Okay, so remember that God is in three places in once. He's in the past, in the present, and in the future, right? And the fact that that person is born, while that person is born and making these choices, yes, God is over here in the future seeing how this is going to end up, but he's also in the present at that same Augenblick trying to convince that person not to end up there. Now, this is where as a human being, I'm going to acknowledge my finite mind. I can only think in one dimension at a time. I can look back, I can look forward, I can look now. But to try to look now at the same time, I admit my limitations in explaining that. But God offering somebody a legitimate choice, there's nothing unfair about that. The fact that that person made the wrong choice, that is not because of God failing in any way. God reached out to that person, did all he could to convince him, and that person rejected it. So whenever I'm dealing with this, and this is just a practical example, what I will tell them is, especially if it's a student, I'll ask them, are you planning to have kids one day? And they'll say, well, yes. I mean, most of the time they would. Okay, are you sure you want to do that? Because that child could be born with defects. That child could grow up and become a murderer, could die young. There's lots of bad things that can happen to that child. And would we blame you then for bringing that child into the world? Because you knew that bad things could happen. Aren't you thus allowing the bad things to happen? And, well, yes, in a sense, you're responsible. You did bring him into the world, but you didn't make that bad thing happen. So that's, again, I go back to that idea in Romans 2, the conscience excusing or accusing. We don't look at the parents as the bad guy there. We look at the fact we're living in a fallen, sinful world where bad things do happen, and I think that translates well to the decision of God to let people come into the world and then make their decisions. Yeah. It's still difficult because we know that some people end up. Okay. But remember, God, yes, he has the foreknowledge, but God is also at the same time in the present trying to change that. So you have to consider that the mind of God can be eternally changing because of what he's doing in the present. Even though in the future it's eternally set. But this is only true of God because he is the one who is, was, and is to come at the same time. None of us are like that. So that's why to us we're like, wait a minute, no. It could only be here, it could only be there. But there's two ways to look at that if you're God. Yeah. But I acknowledge it's not an easy question. Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm following the whole argument there that you're putting out. To acknowledge that maybe your understanding of God is not correct. That's what you're saying. Yeah, I think that's fair. But that's going to be, again, acknowledging our limitations as humans. To say it's hard for us to understand. Why would God put a sinner in hell? Why not punish them by just causing them to annihilate them? Why suffer forever and ever? I admit my limitations. I'm not as holy as God. I accept what he said. I accept that he is giving a proper punishment for sin. And if that's the punishment he's decided, then but because of his character, because he is a just God, I trust that is a fitting punishment. But again, I'm just going to come back to that idea that allowing something to happen is not the same as making it happen. And we don't hold parents responsible for bringing bad kids into the world. Or let's say kids that have bad things happen to them. Okay, anything else? All done? Okay. Praise the Lord. Thank you guys for sticking with it all year. Okay, Brother Garrett, I'm going to ask if you can close us in prayer one last time.